Stand part of the schedule. I call Joe Goodhue.
Thank you, Mr Chair. Well, I'm looking forward to pointing out what the main points are in the tertiary education portfolio and also speaking very briefly on student loans, something that a number of my constituents have certainly given me their views on. It is really important that both in tertiary education and including student loans, that our plan for the future is a sustainable one. But that we also recognise that now is a time when we need to have more students in tertiary education places. So we have put more than 3,000 extra university places in over 2 years. And there are now 186,000 core places at universities and polytechnics in 2011. That is, despite the rhetoric from the left, 11,600 more core places at those institutions, universities and polytechnics, than in 2000. But it is also really very, very important that the government gets value for money, that in fact they look hard at the tertiary education spend and make sure that it is outcomes focused, that in fact we do not have institutions or organisations claiming funding for educating people who are in fact dead, which I understand has actually been happening. So my constituents are relieved to hear that we are not willy-nilly handing out their taxpayer funding without asking for the details of exactly how that's being used. When it comes to student loans, there is a belief amongst many New Zealanders that in fact that is a privilege, and I certainly believe that too. So it is a privilege to receive the taxpayers' money to help you through your education. You will be the better, I should say, the student will be the better for it, and I believe they understand that. But right now we are spending $1.58 billion on student loans in 2010-11. And we've had to borrow that money. We need students to understand that their responsibility is to use it wisely, study their course, qualify, get a job, and then repay that money to the people who loaned it to them. That's the taxpayers. Now, some of my constituents have been telling me they actually believe that students should not be able to go overseas at all until it's all paid back. I must say that I have said I think that's a bit tough, but nevertheless I think it's really important that we have shortened the repayment holiday for overseas borrowers to 1 year. We've also restricted borrowing for those who have had a repayment of $500 plus overdue for more than a year. We are, however, keeping interest-free student loans, and we intend to make sure that we write off a whole lot less than the 47 cents in the dollar plus that it was in 2009. It's now down to 45 cents in the dollar. It is improving, but we still have a long way to go. And it is largely the overseas borrowers. 55% of the of the overdue debt is owned by 15% of the borrowers, and they are overseas. So it is a really generous scheme, but it is a scheme where there is an obligation for the students to pay back the money that will ultimately have made their lives better by improving their education standard. We are also requiring that the students actually pass the courses. This seems like a bit of a no-brainer really, doesn't it? But over a period of 2 years, they must have passed half of their courses. We've also we've said that in fact there must be a limit on how many years they can continue to receive student loans. So I was hearing a story last night from a constituent about someone who went back for a third degree and then said, well, they were intending to do a fourth. And I think that person might be in for a bit of a shock, because simply being a perpetual student and actually having the taxpayers funding that particular lifestyle is not what it was intended for. It is a really important scheme. We have made changes that will make the student loan scheme much more sustainable, reducing the need for more government borrowing to actually fund it. And those students who are overseas will find that we are entering into arrangements for overseas countries to help us track them down so that they can actually repay their loans. there should not be an arrogance amongst students who have borrowed that money and a belief that they can keep that money, not repay the loan. The taxpayers in New Zealand have loaned it, but it is
Order.
a loan.
Mr. Chair. The Honourable Stephen Joyce.
Mr. Chair.